ReleaseWire helps businesses connect with interested journalists and bloggers. Check out the link in the description to save 25% on your first press release.
Admiral, radar shows that we have liberals approaching at 3 o'clock, and libertarians at 9 o'clock, and conservatives at 6 o'clock. They're coming from every angle, every viewpoint. Oh, it's Political Radar with your hosts, Rhonda and Elliot.
Hey, all you political junkies, welcome to Political Radar, the best 30 minutes of unscripted and uncensored political talk you will hear all day long. And we have episode 41, some pretty big hitters in the studio today. No? Maybe? Oh, yeah. We have Russ Feingold and Mark Becker with us. Thanks for coming in. We know you're busy, and we really appreciate the time you're giving us today.
Mm-hmm. Great to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me more than once.
Yeah, I know. I kind of stalked you on this, but so glad you're here.
We had a public admission of stalking.
I'm good. I'll admit it. I'm okay with it, whatever it takes.
Lock, stock, and bagel.
Lock, stock, and bagel. Great little coffee shop / diner in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You had an event today that was really interesting. I want to talk about that at the Chamber. Tell us about that.
Well, I, with the help of the Chamber, was able to host a roundtable where we talked about the issue of infrastructure in the state and in the country, which you'd think would not necessarily be a hot topic, but guess what? It's a huge topic. People are extremely concerned about the crumbling of this country and this state, whether it's roads or whether it's bridges or water infrastructure, railroads, ports, and the internet. Getting a fast speed or high speed internet is a huge issue for up to 1 million people in this state. So we had, State Senator Hansen, Representative Genrich, and we were lucky to have some county board members, including Mark, who was kind enough to say, look, this isn't about political parties. This is about how we can work together to try to improve everybody's life by having a better transportation and transit systems. So I thought it was very upbeat and made me feel great, and maybe Mark wants to comment on it.
Yeah, it was, I think we talked about the fact that this is not a political party discussion. It goes beyond Republican, it goes beyond Democrat. This is something that, it's a discussion that centers around improving the lives of people in Brown County. And I want to be part of that discussion, and it shows a lot of leadership that you would ask me to help host the event, and I greatly appreciate that. I was really encouraged by the discussion that we had. Like you said, this is a serious issue, and it's going to take more than just the regular old partisanship that we've had over the last many years, and it's going to take real leadership to say, hey, we're going to leave our political parties at the door. We're going to come in. We're going to talk about these things. And it's great. I really was honored to be part of that.
What a great idea. Work together, right?
Right.
Yeah, Mark, is not exactly a card-carrying Democrat. He's the former chairman of the Republican Party.
We're actually going to confiscate his wallet on the way out. There's been rumors.
So that shows that he's committed to that. And, obviously I'm a Democrat, and that seemed completely irrelevant to the conversation.
Of course it is, because Democrats and Republicans, we all need the tools to progress in life and to get jobs, to be able to function in today's world. This is not a party thing at all.
No, we met for coffee about a month ago, and I left the meeting really taken back because, we started the meeting talking about not areas that we disagree, but we talked about areas that we do agree, and it's a lot. We're not going to agree on everything, but what's nice is the fact that we can come together, have a very serious discussion, and get things done. I know as an elected official, if you are elected, I know I can call you, and I have a friend that is in D.C. that's willing to help the people of Brown County, and that's what matters.
And I think Mark is actually representing a lot of younger people that this is what they're thinking about with politics lately. They want to see progress. They don't want to see people, digging in, entrenched in their party ideals. They want to see things happening. Would you agree?
Well, I noticed before the show started, Mark was pointing out that I might be older than he is, which is a legitimate. But what the neat thing is that what you just said ties to the time when I started in politics. So when I first ran for the state Senate years ago, I started knocking on doors in places like Portage and Baraboo, Wisconsin. And I'd come to the door, and I noticed if I said anything about Democrat or Republican, it's like you turned the switch off. They didn't want to hear it. But if you talked about your ideas or just listened, everybody felt better. We've had a few years here in the last 5 or 6 years where the politics has gotten away from that. But I think the natural instinct of people is, fine, we understand during election time you got to talk about parties, but they want us to just stop after the election and say, what can you do on a bipartisan basis? Of course, that's what I've always done. People know me best as some John McCain says people think my first name is McCain for McCain Feingold. He loves that joke. He's told it like 8,000 times. But, that's one of my greatest prides is that, I don't think there's too many things people associate necessarily with me, but the fact that they associate my name with bipartisanship, it means the world to me.
You remember when John McCain was running for president and he was the maverick of the Senate? Yeah. Remember that? Bipartisanship shouldn't be a maverick idea.
No, it should be normal.
Yes.
And, when I first came to the Senate, that was much more normal. There's a routine that goes on when a senator is starting to work with a senator from the other party. They're sitting together, and some of their colleagues come up and go, what are you two doing sitting next to each other? And one goes, it's going to destroy my reputation being seen with you, back and forth. But you know what? Even though it sounds like just a sort of a funny conversation, it really was an exciting thing when you'd see people coming together across party lines in the Senate, also in the state Senate when I was there. And I know Mark's doing that on the county board.
So think about what's actually been happening lately. There's not a lot of progress in Wisconsin. We're really, if anything, companies are leaving at a record pace. The job numbers aren't impressive. So really, why wouldn't we try something that's a little more collaborative, right?
Yeah, what I did last year and going to all the counties, and I went to all the counties this year, what I particularly enjoyed this year, we tried to go to an innovative business in almost every county. And we went to Belgioso here. We went down to Appleton Coated and Combined Locks. We were at Offbeat Press in Oshkosh. So many interesting companies. What I found was even though there are serious problems with the politics in the state, fundamentally there's a lot of people, especially younger people, who are exciting new entrepreneurs who just want to see if they can show what they can do. And they don't want politics in the way, but they also want to be able to partner with county boards, with legislators and others to make sure things move in the right direction. A tremendous example is a company called Dealer Fire in Oshkosh. So you know this company?
Yeah, I'm in the auto business. So
of course you would. That's right.
Yep.
So
they're awesome.
It's in an old building on the main drag where the fur industry once was, which was a huge, industry in the 19th century. Well, I went up there, and the young entrepreneur said, I would go up the stairs, and there's 100 people at computer monitors. What are they doing? They're one of the leading developers of websites for car dealers in the world. Now, that never could have happened a few years ago without the internet, and it probably wouldn't have been a young entrepreneur. He's in the car business, Mark is, so he knows that this is something that could not have happened in these areas. So if we could get away from the petty politics, figure out these infrastructure things, encourage this kind of innovation, it's just going to be better for everybody, and it's going to be much more upbeat.
And so how has that idea been received? I mean, you had this event at the chamber, and, was it like a town hall, or did you have questions from the audience? Was it just more of you were just basically talking about what your ideas were?
It was a round table.
It was a round table.
9 or 10 people.
So this on the infrastructure thing?
Yes.
So what's the actual plan? Is this a county plan? Is it a chamber plan? Is it a Russ Feingold plan? What is this?
I think this is just us getting together to...
So this is like the
try to form something.
Okay.
I mean, I do have something called a Badger Innovation Plan.
Okay.
That relates to these things, but I'm always trying to enhance it. I mean, that involves infrastructure. It involves training. It's desperately needed. It involves making sure we export Wisconsin products, not Wisconsin jobs. It involves promoting innovation. But as Mark said, this was an information gathering session that also, as he said better than anybody, was about looking at each other, the chamber, a couple of labor union guys, a couple of legislators, a couple of business people, one of them who said, I'm not a Democrat, and looking at each other and saying, hey, we should be getting to know each other and get used to working together.
Well, I think that's a huge complaint is that, local governments, their control is being taken away. And why would we not collaborate together? so that you could stop having that complaint. I mean, I think that's something that has to happen.
Or just not take the power away in the first place.
Well,
Let it be.
I'm hearing a lot of anxiety from county board people. I just spoke to the Wisconsin Counties Association last week. And some of the moves that are being made both in Madison and Washington would literally take away that control from the county level. And the county is critical. I grew up in a sort of county environment because I grew up in Janesville, and my father was a lawyer, so he was at the courthouse a lot, and my mother was an abstract and title business. So their careers revolved around the courthouse. And I understood that, that was a law enforcement place, it's a human services place. It's a place actually that connects everything up. And when you start gutting the power of the county to bring this all together, I think it's real damaging. And I'm very county-based. I go to all the counties every year. I use that as a way to organize my ability to try to help. So it's good to be with a county board member who understands that.
So on infrastructure, ideally, what would you like to see happen?
Well, on the roads, we've got to have a dedicated funding from the federal government that's paid for, where somebody can look down the road 6 or 7 years and say, all right, that funding is going to be there. I just did a roundtable like this in La Crosse, and the La Crosse County Highway Commissioner said, Russ, 3 or 4 years isn't good enough. We need to be able to go 6 or 7 years. They have not passed a bill yet out there that it's properly paid for that goes far enough. We need funding from the bill, too, for bridges. We've got 15% of the bridges in the state are defective. We need funding for public transit. One of the people at the meeting is very dedicated to hiking or hiking trails and bicycling. A community like this sometimes needs funding for that.
It's one of the goals of Troy Streckenbach is to get an engineering school in UWGB. Well, if you drive Nicolay, which is the only way to get into the school pretty much, there's no biking, there's no sidewalks, so if these young people, who a lot of them don't have cars, they want to get to downtown, they want to get somewhere else, the public transportation isn't very good, the buses. But so their only way to do it would be through bikes and walking trails, and there's nothing out there.
Yeah, and she was just eloquent about this, because what you normally hear, of course, is highways and roads and water infrastructure, rail, ports, which is all very important, but she really added another dimension. That's why it was so great to have a roundtable where you get all the perspectives on what it makes to make a community.
Some people forget about the fact that, we have a future generation coming on board.
Right.
And that we need to facilitate to what their needs are, their attention span, which is not very big.
I have a granddaughter. I never lose sight of the fact that there's future generations coming.
Thank you.
But it was
wow, really? Well, okay.
It was a great example. So right after we got out of that meeting, Representative Genrich, brought his bike. So he biked there. So that kind of reinforced what we were talking about in terms of bringing some of the focus not just to the cars, but to the alternative methods of transportation that we need to.
I want to tie those two things together: the local control and the infrastructure. So I think that a lot of people would share my concern that having federal investment in roads, and it sounds all great, but then it can be taken away, and maybe it shouldn't be coming federally anyway. It should be coming locally. So, it seems like sort of a yo-yo situation where we're all clamoring for better roads, especially in Green Bay. We have a lot of crumbling infrastructure. And so we're hitting up the county board, we're hitting up the city council, and we're hitting all these people hard. And I feel like we're going to have a bunch of improvement, and it's just going to be too cyclical. And I don't know how we handle that better without this like topsy-turvy type of situation.
I don't think you're ever going to have a situation that will work if it's primarily federally funded. It's going to be a mixture.
Okay.
It's going to be federal. It's going to be state. It's going to be local. There's going to have towns. But when things get so bad as they are now, you need a jump start. You need some guaranteed funding from the federal level so the state can say, okay, we feel comfortable weighing in here, and then people at other levels can do it. It sort of builds into a confidence that ultimately can be good for the local communities and give them more control. It doesn't have to be heavy-handed. But, for example, we were told by the woman from the chamber there that, southern Brown County is the fastest growing place in the state, apparently. She was talking about De Pere. They need some help there. It's getting very serious. So there happens to be a federal grant program that you can apply for that could help them. So instead of a federal mandate, they decide as a community, a local community decides, or a group of community decides, we want to try for this. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
So
that's the best way.
What concerns me about that is the Pier is a very wealthy area. So if we're taking federal funds from the mouths of children and we're putting it into roads into Pier, that's sort of.
Well, I don't think it's. I think, as I understand it, it's a whole series of communities, like Lawrence and Hobart and others, and that there is a congestion issue, and you can help me with this.
Yeah, it's we're talking about
really is serious, and so it isn't about the Pier itself.
Okay,
it's about
highway
that the
infrastructure.
economy's not going to be able to work in that area if we don't do something about it.
The biggest thing that they talked about was, I mean, every single person in this room, if you've driven through the De Pere roundabout, you know what the problem is. So that southern bridge is going to alleviate a lot of that congestion. It's not just for, the wealthy people. It's for the people that are living in the rural areas that come into the city to work, and they have to plan their drive time around that roundabout. Or it's people that are, driving up for school or driving, so that's a big issue. And it's funny, I was at the town of Pittsfield. They had their town board meeting. And before the actual board meeting, they had their planning committee meeting. And that planning committee meeting was all 90% of it talking about what roads we need help with and where we need to put money. And that lasted twice as long as the actual town board meeting. So, I mean, this issue is real, and it doesn't just affect the cities. Yes, of course it does, but it affects everybody.
So I always worry about that, though, because sometimes we'll see roads that get rebuilt that don't need to be rebuilt, and then we see things crumble for decades. So
that's right. It should be based on need, and so this grant they're going after, you got to show that it's needed.
Yeah,
that's the good thing about a grant.
Yeah.
Instead of the money being thrown to everybody, you got to win on the merits competition that this is a legitimate thing based on actual statistics.
And I would think most communities understand that quality of life is really important to retaining people. And we have, more people are moving out of Wisconsin than ever before. How do we keep them wanting to live here, invest here, work here, be here, raise their children here? What do we need to do? And I feel like it's about time someone has ideas to do just that.
Well, thank you. I have lots of ideas.
Well, I think it goes beyond ideas too. I think it also is talking about the courage of working with people that you have to step outside of your comfort zone and talk to others and work with people that, that have a different political affiliation. That's what it's going to take too.
Well, so one thing that you kind of touched on before was entrepreneurs. And I think we're probably all in the same camp. I think, on other topics we might disagree on some things. But in terms of entrepreneurs, I know that in all across the country we have a history of trying to bring in big businesses with all sorts of lucrative tax deals and all sorts of things that sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, right? But I think that all of us really want, and I think that I'm speaking really almost for everyone, that we want the idea of American small businesses to thrive and succeed. So what do you think we can do to make that better, especially around here? I'm really concerned about Green Bay.
Well, we got to figure out ways to encourage people that have that kind of instinct or ability. And I'll give you an example from the other side of the state, Chippewa Falls. I met a guy who's got a machine business there. He moved away. He grew up in Chippewa Falls. He loves Chippewa Falls. He moved away, I think, to Texas and Minnesota for 20 years because he didn't feel he had a chance to really have that opportunity here. But with changes in technology and other things, he has now come back to Chippewa Falls. And right there along the river, he has a company called Machine Tool Camp. And what he figured out was that if he takes the base of an old machine, not a brand new machine, but the base of an old machine, and he says remanufactures it, he can sell that to a company for far less than a new machine, and it'll still totally do the job. So what did this guy do? He came back because he wants the lifestyle. He wants that beautiful Chippewa Valley life for his family and for himself. And I am finding that all over the state. What we got at this roundtable was another point. It's also bringing people in that are never from Wisconsin. What one woman said there was a lot of people first in the younger generations now will
like how you looked at me. Thank you.
I was very careful about that, and I thought
I'm pretty sure she's the oldest.
No way. The younger generation. She said that they will first choose where they want to live before they choose what job to take. And I've seen this over in Viroqua, where there was 2 or 3 couples. They are not from Wisconsin. Very bright, talented people who said, we love this spot here. We want to bring our kids up. And they have the coolest coffee operation. I mean, bringing in coffee from all over the world. Next door to it is a tremendous Wispop soda factory, all in the same spot. They've come for our quality of life. But now, because of the internet and other things, they can actually do that out in an area where years ago people would have talked about the brain drain. If we do this right on a nonpartisan basis, all these areas that have experienced loss over the years, they can become incredibly revitalized because this is an incredibly beautiful state. And people want to live here if they know they can have a living. So that's what I've discovered out there.
And I would imagine in your area that you represent on the county board, people could use a little more internet service out there.
Yeah,
right?
We talked about that at the roundtable. That's one of the big things that of your Badger Innovation Plan is obviously the technical schools. My wife and I graduated from there, but then also bringing broadband to rural communities. I mean that hits home, representing Pulaski and Pittsfield and some of the rural communities. I mean we have businesses there. We've got Belgioso has a factory. We have the Marquee Yachts that employ a lot of people, and our community is growing too. So, if we have a plan that invests in not just the inner cities, which is good,
well, the
but
thing
also
is, though, the Universal Service Fund has been in practice forever. And actually, in Wisconsin and Texas in particular, the rural phone companies have been building up big buildings, and they have a lot of expenditures they probably shouldn't have. So it's not as black and white as it might seem, where we can just dump some money onto it. I think we need maybe some money with some oversight as to how this is handled, because I think that
Did you just say regulation?
Well, I would rather not spend the money. I would rather see it come from
I
competition.
think you just said regulation.
Well, there's a way to do that, though. The problem right now is that there are three giant companies that control this, Charter, AT&T, and Time Warner. And so states sort of fence them in, like Wisconsin has less. So others who would compete, municipalities, co-ops, rural electrics, they can't get in the game.
Right.
So what you do is pass a national law, like the Sherman antitrust law, where you say, hey, states can't do that. So it's not the federal government saying it's them or this guy or that. They're saying everybody gets to get in the game and have a fair competition to provide that. So instead of throwing money at the problem, we're saying, let's let all the players get involved. Again, because I am a little older than some of you, I remember people teaching me when I first started running for office what rural electrics did for this country. In almost every rural part of this state, people remember fondly that it was only because of the rural electric movement that people got electricity. Those big companies were never going to provide electricity to people. It's the same deal with the internet. We have to broaden the players so there can be legitimate competition.
So do you think is this kind of an unprecedented thing for you to have these ideas to work in Wisconsin? Is this something that you're seeing from your opponent? I don't recall hearing any of this at all.
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
And here's the difference. It's a difference in how somebody understands the job of being a senator. I believe a representative is not a CEO or a boss. It's a very different kind of job. Every kind of job is different. A representative has to listen to people to be able to make a judgment about whether something is doable and whether people really want it, and then try to do something about it. That's different than being the big boss. And Senator Johnson looks at it the other way. He comes in and says, I'm just going to come and tell people what the story is. Here are the problems. That's not how it works. The people know the problems. The people are the ones that experience the problems. It's not some guy in Fox News that has to drive 2 miles after dinner to come back into town to get Wi-Fi. It's the kid who's trying to get through high school and compete with kids in the city. So my approach has always been listen first, listen all the time, not just at election time. That doesn't mean I always get it right. Doesn't mean that people aren't going to disagree with me. But the one thing people know is that I'm going to listen, and Senator Johnson doesn't really believe in that.
Well, this morning I was listening to the radio, and it sounds like the National Republican Senatorial Committee is pulling money out of ads for Ron Johnson. They decided, we're going to take that. It was like $800,000. We're going to put it into other races. Is that a concession?
I'm just going to run scared here down to the absolute last minute, 8 o'clock p.m. on November 8th. I'm glad that any out-of-state money doesn't come in from outside groups like this. Senator Johnson's had $10 million worth of outside help. He's had far more ad time than I've had, and most of it's from out of state. And I've had much less, and I don't even want that. We have a grassroots campaign. 50,000 Wisconsin contributors have contributed to me. 50,000. It's many more times than Senator Johnson. 95% of the contributions I've received are $100 or less, and the average contribution is $50. It's not quite Bernie, but it's good. It's darn good. It's one of the best. I just
Why is anybody looking at me?
because you look so
Bernie
young.
Sanders?
Okay, you'll enjoy.
That I agree with. I do look.
You'll enjoy what Bernie said to me. He called me up a couple months ago and said he wanted to help me on the campaign. He had finished this campaign. He wanted to help me out. And I said, Bernie, first let me just say, you've done a tremendous job. And I said, how did you do it? He said, I'm younger than you are.
He probably did.
He's not.
Yeah, but I could hear him saying that. Yeah. So in terms of campaign finance, I would like to just I don't know the solution to that, and I know you've done some things, and I know everybody talks about Citizens United, but really, how do we fix it? In an ideal world where you didn't have to compromise, what would you really want to do to fix it?
That may sound strange, but it's not hard to fix at all.
Yeah.
It was a 5-4 decision, Citizens United. It was a lousy decision. It's now 4-4. Justice Scalia has passed away. Once a new justice is appointed, I think by Hillary Clinton, if they don't approve Merrick Garland, I think they'll have a case and they'll overturn it. Now, what does that mean? It means we'll get back to the way it was ever since 1907, which is corporations didn't used to be able to use their funds to dominate our elections. Put it the most straight form.
Well, directly, right? Because they
were very limited. They were not able to use the money. Here's the way to explain it. When you bought a tube of toothpaste from 1907 to 2010, that money could never be used for a campaign because the progressives and Teddy Roosevelt, the Republicans, signed a bill that said, wait a minute, it's bad enough that the oil companies are controlling our economy. We're not going to give them the political process too. This completely changed that. And it has led to this huge amount of unlimited, unreported campaign contributions. When McCain-Feingold passed, we had this thing in a much different place. If we're able to overturn Citizens United, we're going to be in a good place again. And we're going to make sure that we require, if I'm able to be part of this process again, that these contributions are openly disclosed.
Your opponent is actually holding that process hostage right now.
Horrifically.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that he wouldn't do his job and even consider a Supreme Court nominee. This has essentially never been done like this. The longest period ever in American history was 125 days for Louis Brandeis, Justice Brandeis. When I was in the Senate, George Bush was president for 8 years. And when he had 2 appointments for the Supreme Court, I never questioned that he should be able to fill those. I had the right to vote no, but I voted yes on one and no on the other.
How many days are we looking at right now that
Oh,
happening?
God, it's got to be 150, 160, something like that.
And that would make a difference in being able to go forward and vote on this and change that.
It is beyond belief that Senator Johnson and others think they can disregard the plain language of the Constitution and deny the choice of the people of America. They chose Barack Obama. Whether people like it or not, this is his constitutional role, and their role is to vote on it. And it's been very cynical that they kicked it over to the next election. That should not be done by either political party.
I agree with you.
And what is his reason? Because I haven't really
Well,
seen
he said
anything.
it should be left to the people at the next, let the people decide. But the people decided, and the guy has a 4-year term. But here's what's really disturbing about what Senator Johnson said. He said, of course, it might be a little different if Mitt Romney had won. In other words, he doesn't even mean it. What he's saying is if his team had won, then he would have put the person through. So that's the worst of partisan politics.
But this is a little bit unprecedented.
Well,
this isn't
but he's totally unprecedented.
Yeah, this is not something that happened.
Race.
Now this
actually hasn't happened.
It's really bad for the Supreme Court because Democrats are going to be tempted to do the same thing.
That's exactly right.
How do the Democrats go? Well, we'll just put their people through, but they won't put our people through. Obviously, that can't work.
So okay, I want to ask you about the Patriot Act because otherwise we'll lose our time and I won't get to hear what you have to say about that. But fill me in on your take on the Patriot Act and why you voted no and what you think going forward on that.
I did something kind of crazy that people couldn't believe. I read the bill.
I did too.
Yeah, and I was apparently the only one that read it. It wasn't that long.
No.
And it wasn't that hard to determine what was going on. So a lot of the provisions in the Patriot Act 2001 made sense. For example, longer statute of limitations for a bioterror crime. Or at that time, if you had legal right to eavesdrop on somebody, you'd gotten your court order, you could get a live conversation, but you couldn't get a voicemail. Well, that made no sense. It's because the law didn't know what a voicemail was. Pretty soon the law's not going to know what one is anymore because it's going to be obsolete. But those made sense. But then if you take a closer look, there were 12 or so provisions that were put in there by the FBI thinking, this bill is going to pass. We can use these in drug cases and other stuff. In other words, this is very serious stuff that had to do with terrorism where they took an opportunity to jam this stuff in there. Robert Novak, one of the most conservative commentators on CNN over the years, he's passed away now, but he said, this is nothing but an old wish list of the FBI. So I objected. And I said, wait a minute, we should be able to get this right. And it was the right vote. You know, Senator Johnson has tried to attack me on this vote, but he won't mention the name of the bill because he knows that people like you and others realize that standing up on the Patriot Act was a way to protect perfectly innocent Americans from the government snooping around in their private lives. And I will always be proud of that vote.
So what's your take on Snowden?
Well, I think Snowden's information is important. I don't think he should be pardoned. I think he should face the law. The prosecutors can decide whether or not they want to prosecute him. There could be plea agreements about how it should work. Maybe he'll be prosecuted and be punished. Maybe the punishment will reflect the fact that what he did had elements that were beneficial to the country, but I cannot justify simply saying it's perfectly all right to give away secrets. But there can be a positive outcome of this where he comes back, faces the law, but in a way that perhaps is reasonable.
So we're 34 days out from the election.
Did you just count?
I did. Oh, I'm counting. Trust me.
I think everybody is.
Yeah. No, I'm counting. I'm terrified. Can you tell me something that makes me feel like I'm not going to have to, sit down in front of my television on election night and...
You're gonna anyway.
Well, more than likely.
I can't be sure which direction you're terrified in, but I have a guess.
I'm terrified of obvious.
I think you can say it. It's okay.
It's so hard to say it. I do not want to see Donald Trump as my president. So, I know there's, you have a lot going on. Can you give me any sense of reassurance? I mean, you're out there a lot. You hear people are saying, I'm seeing polls, is it what's happening? Is that what you're hearing? What's going on with that?
I think I can reassure you. It's good to be scared because when people aren't a little scared about something this dangerous, they can have a mistake. I mean, this happened in Britain with this Brexit thing, where people were goofing around and saying, well, let's get out of the European Union. And same thing happened in Colombia yesterday where they had a peace agreement and got voted out. So stuff like this can happen. But I think people are aware of the consequences. Look, if you really do care about your kids and your grandchildren, you don't want this country to be a source of instability in the world. Donald Trump would be one of the most destabilizing influences in the entire world. It will make the Russians very nervous. It will make the Chinese very nervous, the French, the British. Everybody's going to say they're not going to be able to rely on what the United States will do because he clearly has a very, very short attention span. And that's not good for the world. Not to mention, he will have been elected based on dividing people against each other within this country, which could cause instability in this country. So if you care about a future, you'll stay a little scared, but also be assured that in the end, Hillary Clinton was going to be elected because the American people are not going to take this crazy risk.
And she has stamina. She does.
Tremendous stamina. I've been on trips with her over to Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iraq, and she has incredible energy.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I want to end it that way. I don't know. I think it was pretty interesting, amazing information to hear from you. I'm so grateful that you're here. So nice to see people working together. Don't see that anymore. I think that's really important to have. It's going to make all the difference, I believe.
You're going to see more of it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, everybody. Great to be on the show.
So that wraps up Political Radar, episode 41. Please put your concerns and comments and all the crazy looks I was given when Rhonda was talking and we shared a camera. So I would love to hear some talk about that in the Political Radar community on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Elliot C on Facebook. I'm Elliot on Twitter. And Rhonda can tell you how to find her, and these guys can fill in any follow-up that they'd like to have.
I'm at Sitnickow, and I am on Facebook. How can we get a hold of the two of you?
RussFeingold.com.
Mark Becker 26 Twitter, and I'm on Facebook. I think it's like Mark Becker for supervisor or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
What a slick politician. And that is it. We're out.
Thanks for listening to Political Radar. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. To stay up to date, visit politicalradar.com or connect with us on Facebook or Twitter.